Chapter 1. The Arrival. That which does not serve creation shall be cut from creation. Doctrine of Divine Utility. Scripture of the Reging. Eldrin had heard those words all his life. They were carved into temple walls in Lichtheim. They were whispered by priests beneath silver branches and sung by children before they were old enough to understand what they meant. They lived inside every law, every prayer, every lesson about purity, bloodline, duty, and obedience. Creation had a purpose. Every life had to serve it. Every body had to continue it. Every heart had to bend before it. And anything that did not serve creation was not merely wrong, it was dangerous. Eldrin had spent 21 years trying to become the kind of son Lichtheim could be proud of. He had bowed when expected, spoken softly when watched, hidden every thought that felt too wild, too warm, too impossible. He had learned how to lower his eyes, how to keep his hands still, how to make his face beautiful and empty when the world demanded silence from him. But none of that had saved him. By the time the white towers of his homeland disappeared behind the sea mist, Eldrin understood one thing with painful clarity. Lichtheim had not sent him away because he was weak. They had sent him away because they were afraid of what he might become. The journey to Runenhof should have been impossible for someone like him. First came the sea. More than a month surrounded by black water, salt wind, and the groaning bones of the ship beneath his feet. The ocean stretched forever in every direction, endless and cruel, swallowing the horizon each morning and returning it each night. Storms struck without warning. Waves climbed high enough to hide the stars. Men twice Eldrin's size fell sick, cursed the gods, and clung to the rails as if the sea itself had reached up to drag them under. Eldrin endured it in silence. He spent long nights wrapped in a travel cloak too thin for the cold, pale fingers gripping the edge of the deck while the wind cut through him. His short white hair whipped across his brow and around his pointed ears, damp with salt and mist. He did not complain. He could not afford to. Complaints belonged to people who expected comfort. Eldrin expected nothing. After the sea came the land. 23 days by road. 23 days of mud, stone, aching feet, and strange eyes watching him from every village he passed. Human farmers stopped working when they saw him. Dwarven merchants leaned closer from their carts. Troll sentries turned their heads as he walked by. Even children stared, not with fear, but with the breathless fascination people saved for rare omens. An elf. Not just any elf. A highborn elf from Lichtheim, sent east across the world to Runenhof. The first in 1,000 years. That fact traveled faster than he did. By the time Eldrin reached the outer roads of the conclave, people already knew. He heard the whispers before he saw the academy walls. An elf? Here? After 1,000 years? Does Lichtheim finally mean to stand with us? Maybe this one was sent to help end the war. Maybe the elves have brought us a miracle. Eldrin kept walking. He did not know whether to laugh or grieve at the hope in their voices. They looked at him and saw an omen, a promise, a sign that the distant white towers of Lichtheim had finally turned their eyes toward the suffering of the other mortal realms. They did not see the truth. They did not see the exhaustion beneath his silence. They did not see the wound behind his golden eyes. They did not see a young man who had crossed an ocean and half a continent with no choice left but survival. To them, Eldrin was not an exile. He was the first elf in 1,000 years to come to Runenhof. And because of that, they wanted him to mean something. His body was not built for such a journey. At least that was what others would have said if they looked at him.
Eldrin had the delicate beauty of Lichtheim's noble bloodlines. Slender limbs, smooth, pale skin, and features too fine for the brutal world waiting beyond the elven coast. His face held a softness that made strangers underestimate him. His mouth was shaped gently. His jaw was clean and elegant, not yet hardened by war. His white hair was short and softly tousled, falling in uneven strands across his forehead and around his pointed ears, bright as moonlight against his pale skin. And his golden eyes carried a brightness that seemed almost unnatural beneath the shadow of the road. He looked to most like something meant to be guarded behind marble walls, not sent to a military academy, not thrown among warriors, not placed in a world where strength was measured in scars, muscle, and the ability to obey without breaking. But Eldrin had already learned that softness was not the same as weakness. His hands, though pale and fine-boned, had held back pain no one had seen. His body, though slender, had carried him across sea and land without surrender. And his heart, though wounded in places he refused to name, still beat with a stubbornness that frightened even him. On the 23rd day of land travel, Runenhof appeared before him. It rose from the valley like a fortress pretending to be holy. Pale walls caught the morning light. Towers pierced the mist. Ancient arches stretched over stone courtyards large enough to hold armies. Runes glowed faintly along the gates, carved deep into metal and bone-white marble, pulsing with old magic. Above everything, the Academy's clock tower stood like an eye watching the world prepare for war. Eldrin stopped at the edge of the road. For a moment, he simply looked at it. Runenhof, a grand academy, the place where boys were turned into weapons, the place where men learned to kill for the Alliance, bleed for the gods, and bury everything inside themselves that did not serve the purpose of war. No elf had been sent here in a millennium. Yet here Eldrin stood, travel-worn, exhausted, and alone, with salt still clinging to his skin and dust staining the hem of his cloak. Behind him lay Lichtheim, the realm that had raised him, judged him, and cast him out. Before him stood Runenhof, waiting to decide whether he would be remade or destroyed. Eldrin drew a slow breath. Then he stepped through the gates. And for one breathless moment, Eldrin forgot to be afraid. Runenhof was beautiful. That was the first cruelty of it. From the road, it had looked like a fortress. From within, it revealed itself as something far older and more elegant. A castle of pale stone and dark roofs, rising between green mountains and silver mist. Its towers pierced the morning haze. Its windows caught the light like watchful eyes. Ivy climbed some of the outer walls in soft green veins, and beyond the inner courtyards, Eldrin glimpsed gardens, arched bridges, narrow paths, and a lake so still it seemed to hold a second sky beneath its surface. It did not look like a place built for war. It looked like a place from the old songs. The kind of castle where kings were blessed, where scholars studied beneath candlelight, where gods might have once walked through the halls before the world learned how to hate. For a moment, Eldrin stood beneath the great archway and simply stared. He had expected iron, mud, blood, shouting, the brutal scent of sweat and weapons and soldiers packed shoulder to shoulder. Instead, there was sunlight on stone, wind moving through high trees, the distant sound of water. Beauty. But Eldrin knew better than to trust beauty. Lichtheim had been beautiful too. Its towers had shone white beneath the stars. Its temples had smelled of flowers and incense. Its priests had spoken softly while teaching children which hearts were holy and which ones deserved to be cut from creation. Runenhof was different, but not kinder. Its beauty was only a veil. Behind the carved arches and quiet gardens, boys were being turned into weapons. Young men from every corner of the Alliance were brought here to be shaped, hardened, and prepared for the war waiting beyond the eastern barriers. They would learn to summon fire, bend stone, carve runes, strengthen flesh, and kill without hesitation. Because beyond the civilized realms, beyond the walls and towers and sacred laws, the shadow waited. Skuggards, children of corrupted Aethel, creatures born from the wound of an ancient war, driven by hunger, darkness, and the desire to consume all mortal life. The priests of Lichtheim spoke of them as nightmares. The generals spoke of them as enemies. The scriptures called them proof that creation could rot when touched by shadow. And Runenhof existed for one reason: to make sure that rot never crossed fully into the world. Eldrin tightened his fingers around the folded map in his hand. The parchment had been given to him at the outer gate by a bored human guard who barely looked at him before pointing toward the inner grounds. "Registration hall," the man had muttered. "Main corridor, east wing, don't wander." Eldrin had nodded as if those words meant anything. Now he stood alone in a wide stone passage that split into 3 different directions, each one lined with arches, banners, and doors tall enough for giants. The map showed a neat arrangement of courtyards, towers, halls, barracks, training grounds, libraries, and administrative rooms. None of it made sense. He turned the map once, then again, then slowly lowered it. The corridor ahead was empty. That unsettled him more than a crowd would have. He had imagined being watched the moment he entered, had imagined cadets turning to stare, instructors whispering, soldiers measuring the fragile-looking elf from Lichtheim with cold amusement. But the academy seemed almost abandoned. No voices, no boots striking stone, no distant clash of training weapons. Only the echo of his own footsteps following him through the halls. Eldrin walked on. He passed beneath high, vaulted ceilings where old runes had been carved into the ribs of the stone. Some glowed faintly as he moved beneath them, pale blue and gold, like sleeping eyes waking just enough to notice him. He passed open galleries where wind carried the scent of pine and wet earth. He crossed a small garden where white flowers grew beside a narrow fountain, their petals trembling in the breeze. Everything was too quiet, too clean, too still. At Lichtheim, silence had always meant judgment. Here, it felt like something waiting. Eldrin stopped at the edge of another courtyard and looked down at the map again. His thumb brushed over the inked lines, searching for the path to the registration hall. Main corridor, east wing, administrative passage. He looked left, then right. Both corridors seemed equally ancient, equally empty, and equally determined to lead him somewhere he was not supposed to be. A faint flush of frustration warmed his face. He had crossed an ocean, survived storms, walked 23 days across foreign roads, endured hunger, cold, stares, whispers, and the slow ache of exile settling into his bones. And now, at the very end of it all, Runenhof might defeat him with a map. Eldrin exhaled quietly, almost laughing despite himself. Then a sound reached him. Distant, heavy, slow. A single pair of boots on stone. Eldrin lifted his head. The silence of the academy had not broken. It had found a shape. Eldrin kept walking. The map remained open in his hands, though it was becoming less useful with every turn he took. Each corridor seemed to lead into another corridor, each archway into another hall,
each stone passage into another quiet corner of the academy. He crossed a narrow bridge above a lower courtyard, past a row of tall windows flooded with pale morning light, then turned into a long, vaulted corridor where old banners hung motionless from the ceiling. Still no one. No cadets, no instructors,
No servants rushing between rooms. Only silence, deep and uncanny, broken now and then by the soft echo of his own boots against stone. The emptiness unsettled him. For a place so large, so vital, so tied to war, Runenhof felt strangely asleep. Beautiful, yes, but too quiet, too composed, as if the academy were holding its breath around him. Eldrin turned another corner, glanced at the map once more, and nearly stopped breathing. Someone was standing at the far end of the corridor. A troll. Even at a distance, there was something arresting about him. He stood still beneath a shaft of light falling through a high window, one shoulder angled slightly toward the wall, his posture rigid, powerful, and utterly self-possessed. He was not moving, yet his presence filled the corridor as completely as if he had blocked it with his body alone. Serious. No, not serious. Angry. Or perhaps that was simply how his face had been shaped. Sharp, hard, beautiful in a severe and dangerous way. His expression held no softness, no welcome. His jaw was set, his mouth still, and there was a cold intensity in the way he watched the empty corridor ahead of him, as if even silence irritated him. Eldrin slowed without meaning to. This was not what the old elven books had taught him trolls looked like. As a child, he had seen painted images in ancient war texts and temple histories. Brutish creatures with twisted faces, jutting fangs, hunched backs, and monstrous proportions. Beasts clothed in skin and rage. Crude things meant to frighten children and justify fear. But the being before him was nothing like that. There were no fangs, nothing grotesque, nothing clumsy or monstrous. He was, in truth, devastatingly male. Tall enough to seem almost unreal within the corridor, broad through the shoulders and chest, with the kind of physique that spoke of violence, discipline, and raw physical power. His skin was olive green, not bright or unnatural, but deep and rich, like sun-warmed stone touched by moss and shadow. Dark veins traced faintly beneath the skin of his forearms and hands, visible where strength tightened beneath the surface. His arms were bare, thick, veined, powerful enough that Eldrin could not look at them without feeling a strange heat coil low in his stomach. A dark leather vest clung tightly across his torso, leaving the shape of him impossible to ignore. It strained over a broad chest and powerful abdomen, and where the neckline fell open, Eldrin caught sight of a dusting of dark body hair over firm olive skin. The sight hit him with a force that felt indecent. He had never seen a man like this. The stranger's dark hair was swept back from his face, slightly disordered, as though he had come from training or from battle with the wind. It only made him look more dangerous, more alive. His features were severe and striking, high cheekbones, a strong mouth, pointed ears, and a face so sharply formed it might have been carved rather than born. And his eyes, even from where Eldrin stood, he could see them. Blue. A deep, cold blue, clear as winter ice and somehow more unsettling for it. They did not soften his face. If anything, they made him more frightening, more predatory. Like a beautiful animal that had learned how to wear stillness before the strike. Eldrin felt it at once. The energy coming from him. Predatory. Magnificent. There was no other word for it. This troll did not merely stand in the corridor, he occupied it, claimed it, bent the air around him with the force of his presence. He looked like something born to dominate whatever space he entered, and for one helpless moment, Eldrin felt as though he had stepped into the path of a great hunting beast. He should have looked away. He knew that instantly. Any sensible person would have lowered their eyes and kept walking. There was danger in a creature like this. Not hidden danger, not polite danger. Something open and instinctive, sharpened into the shape of a man.
But Eldrin could not look away. He stood there, map forgotten in his hands, and stared. His pulse had quickened before he even understood why. His mouth felt suddenly dry. He became acutely aware of himself, of the dust on his boots, the thinness of his frame, the travel cloak around his shoulders, the way his own body must appear beside such overwhelming masculine force. And still he stared. The troll turned his head, slowly. His gaze landed on Eldrin with such direct force that it felt almost physical. Eldrin's breath caught. For one suspended instant, neither of them moved. And in that silence, with light pouring through the corridor and the map trembling slightly in his hands, Eldrin understood only one thing with painful, bewildering clarity. He had never seen anything so frightening or so beautiful. The troll's eyes narrowed. Eldrin realized too late that he had been staring, not glancing, not politely noticing, staring. The kind of stare that stripped away every lesson Lichtheim had carved into him about restraint, modesty, and silence. His gaze had lingered too long on the width of the troll's shoulders, the heavy shape of his arms, the open line of his vest, the dark hair across his chest, the cold blue of his eyes. The troll saw all of it. His mouth curved, but there was no warmth in it. "You like what you see?" The question struck Eldrin like a hand around his throat. Heat rushed to his face. His fingers tightened around the map, the parchment bending under his grip. For one terrible second, he could not speak. He had been caught. Not doing anything, not touching, not saying a word. Only looking. And somehow that felt worse. Eldrin began, but the word died almost instantly. The troll pushed away from the wall. The movement was slow, controlled, and terrifyingly deliberate. He did not need to rush. He did not need to raise his voice. Every step carried enough weight to make the silence around them feel smaller. Eldrin stood still as the troll came closer. Too close. Close enough for Eldrin to feel the difference between them with painful clarity. The troll was larger in every way. Taller, broader, stronger. His body seemed built for impact, for battle, for taking space without asking permission. Eldrin suddenly felt the narrowness of his own shoulders beneath his cloak, the softness of his face, the pale delicacy of his hands. The troll looked down at him, not with curiosity,
With challenge. "What the heck is an elf doing here?"
The words were harsh, roughened by contempt. Eldrin swallowed. His heart was beating too fast, and he hated that he could not decide whether it was fear or something far more dangerous. He lowered his eyes to the map, then forced himself to look up again. "Would you know where the student registry is?" For a moment, the troll simply stared at him. Then he laughed. Not loudly. That would have been easier to bear. It was a low, cruel sound, the kind that made Eldrin feel as if every part of him had been measured and found amusing. "Student registry," the troll repeated. He stepped even closer. Eldrin had to fight the instinct to step back. "It is a military academy. We are cadets." His gaze moved over Eldrin again, slower this time. From his short white hair to his golden eyes, from the fine shape of his face to the travel cloak hanging around his slender frame. The troll's expression hardened with something sharper than dislike. Disgust, perhaps, or disbelief. "This is not a place for girls." The words cut deeper than Eldrin expected. His lips parted, but no answer came. The troll tilted his head, studying him as if Eldrin were some strange mistake that had wandered into the wrong world. "You are too soft, too pretty, too fragile." Eldrin's face burned. He had heard gentler versions of those words in Lichtheim, spoken behind jeweled fans, hidden beneath courtly smiles, wrapped in concern and prayer until the insult almost sounded like guidance. But here, there was no silk around the blade. Here, the blade was bare. The troll leaned closer, his shadow falling over Eldrin's body. "Neither elves nor girls are welcome here, so you better leave." Eldrin's throat tightened. The map trembled slightly in his hand. He wanted to answer, wanted to tell this brute that he had crossed an ocean and half a continent to reach this place, that he had survived storms, hunger, exile, and silence, that he was not some decorative thing to be dismissed because his bones looked delicate and his face did not please the shape of their violence. But the words stayed trapped behind his teeth. The troll's blue eyes darkened. "You do not belong here." Eldrin felt the sentence settle over him like a verdict. For a moment, the corridor seemed to stretch around them, cold and endless. Runenhof's beauty vanished. The castle, the gardens, the lake, the sunlight on stone, all of it fell away, leaving only this massive figure before him and the terrible familiarity of being told he was wrong for existing as he was. Then the troll's mouth twisted again. "We do not need weak elves like you around." The troll's hands closed into fists. The sound was small, almost nothing. Leather creaking, knuckles tightening, breath shifting through his chest. But Eldrin heard it as clearly as a blade being drawn. His body went still. The troll moved closer. One slow step, then another. There was almost no space left between them now. Eldrin could see the faint lines in his olive skin, the tension working through his jaw, the dark veins standing out along his forearms as his fists tightened at his sides. He looked less like a cadet and more like a storm deciding where to break. Eldrin should have stepped back. He knew that. But his feet would not move. Fear held him there. Something else, too. Something shameful and confusing that made his breath uneven as the troll's shadow swallowed him against the stone wall. "Maybe Lichtheim forgot to tell you what happens here. This place does not protect pretty things." Eldrin's heart struck hard against his ribs. The troll's fist lifted slightly. Not enough to strike. Not yet.
But enough for Eldrin to understand the promise of it. Volkov. It came from the far end of the hall. Deep, controlled, powerful enough to make the stone itself seem to listen. Volkov froze. Eldrin turned his head. A human stood beneath the next archway, tall and broad, his figure half shadowed by the light behind him. He moved forward with calm, deliberate steps, but there was nothing gentle in the force he carried. He was powerfully built, with broad shoulders, thick arms, and the grounded strength of someone shaped by discipline rather than ornament. Short, light brown hair framed a hard, handsome face marked by light stubble and a strong jaw. His blue eyes were fixed on Volkov, steady and unafraid. A worn, dark leather vest hung open over a low white shirt, revealing the hard line of his chest and the dark hair there. Leather bracers wrapped his wrists, and every step of his boots against the stone sounded measured, heavy, certain. Unlike Volkov, he did not carry danger like a threat. He carried it like a promise. "Back off!" Volkov's mouth tightened. The human kept walking until he stood close enough for Eldrin to feel the shift in the air around him. He did not look at Eldrin as if he were an omen, a curiosity, or a mistake. He looked at him as if he were someone worth protecting. Then he said the words that changed everything. "He is with me." Eldrin's breath caught. He did not know this man, had never seen him before, and yet those words fell around him with the weight of a shield.